The silence in the room was so heavy, it felt like it could crush my ribs. Dust motes danced in the sliver of afternoon light cutting across the mahogany desk, indifferent to the war that was about to break out. Mr. Henderson, the family lawyer, whose face was as creased and worn as the leather armchair he sat in, adjusted his spectacles. He looked over the rim of his glasses, his eyes darting from the weeping, mascara-stained face of my cousin Vanessa to me, sitting quietly in the corner, clutching a tissue that had long since disintegrated into lint. "I visited every single week!" Vanessa screamed, her voice cracking, shattering the solemn atmosphere of the library. She stood up, her expensive designer chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. Her hands, manicured to perfection in a shade of blood red, slammed onto the desk. "You cannot be serious. This is a mistake, a fraud. I was the one who was there. I was the one who checked on her. She was senile. She didn't know what she was writing." Miss Henderson didn't flinch. He just held up a small, silver digital recorder. It looked like a toy, something insignificant, yet it held the weight of 1,000 judgments. "She visited weekly, yes," the lawyer said, his voice dropping an octave, deadly calm. "You came for money, Vanessa. She knew it. She recorded every conversation you had. Would you like me to play them?" Vanessa's face went from flushed crimson to a ghostly, sickly white. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The air left the room. My heart was hammering against my chest so hard, I thought everyone could hear it. I looked at the recorder, then at Vanessa, whose eyes were wide with a terror I had never seen in her before. But wait. To understand why my cousin looked like she had seen a ghost, and to understand why I was sitting there trembling, not with greed, but with the overwhelming grief of losing my best friend, you have to understand how we got here. You have to understand who Nana Rose really was, and what happened on those rainy Sunday afternoons when nobody else was watching. Let me take you back to the beginning, before the lawyers, before the screaming, before the inheritance that tore our family apart. It started with the smell of lavender and old paper. That was the scent of Nana Rose's house. For as long as I can remember, that house on the hill was a fortress of solitude. My grandmother was a woman of few words to the outside world, stern, with a spine of steel and eyes that seemed to see right through your soul. To the rest of the family, she was the matriarch, the bank, the woman you visited when you needed a loan or a signature. But to me, she was just Nana. I was 29 years old, working double shifts at a diner just to make rent on a studio apartment that smelled like damp drywall. I was tired, deeply, in my bones tired. But every Sunday, without fail, I took the bus across town. It was a 2-hour ride, bumpy and smelling of diesel, but I never missed it. I remember one Sunday specifically, about 6 months before she passed. It was pouring rain, the kind of rain that chills you to the marrow. I arrived at her doorstep, my cheap coat soaked through, my sneakers squelching. "Marta, child," Nana had scolded, pulling me inside with hands that were twisted by arthritis but still incredibly warm. She was small, shrinking with age, wrapped in a knitted shawl I had made her 3 Christmases ago. It was lopsided and the wool was cheap, but she wore it like it was ermine. "I'm fine, Nana," I had smiled, shivering as I peeled off my coat. "I just wanted to see you. I brought those lemon cookies you like, the soft ones." She looked at me then. It was a look I'll never forget, a mixture of profound sadness and piercing love. She reached out and touched my wet cheek. "You always bring something, Marta, even when you have nothing." We sat in the parlor, the same room where the lawyer would later read her will. We drank tea from chipped porcelain cups because she saved the good china for company, though I never understood who that company was supposed to be. We talked about everything and nothing. I told her about the rude customer who threw coffee at me. She told me about the birds she watched from the window, giving them names and backstories. "Why do you come?" she asked suddenly that day. The rain was lashing against the glass. "Because I love you," I said simply, dipping a cookie into my tea. "Vanessa comes too," she said, her voice turning brittle. I stiffened. I knew Vanessa came. She made sure everyone knew. She posted about it on social media every week. "That's good, Nana," I lied, trying to be the peacemaker. "It's good she visits." Nana Rose let out a scoff that sounded more like a bark. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "She visits, yes. She sits in this chair, Marta. She checks her watch. She asks about the house. She asks about the jewelry. She asks if I've seen the doctor, not because she cares about my health, but to calculate how much time is left." I didn't know what to say. I knew Vanessa. I knew my cousins saw people as stepping stones. But hearing Nana say it out loud hurt. It hurt because Nana deserved better. "She thinks I'm deaf," Nana whispered, leaning back into her chair, looking smaller than ever. "Or stupid. Last week, she was on the phone in the hallway. She thought I was asleep. She was talking to that boyfriend of hers." My stomach turned. "Nana." "It's all right," she interrupted, waving a hand. "I know the score. I'm old, Marta. I'm a burden to them. A vault they're waiting to crack open." "You are not a burden," I said fiercely, grabbing her hand. "You are my grandmother. I don't care about the silver. I don't care about the house. I just want you to be here. Who else is going to teach me how to knit without dropping stitches?" She squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "You're a good girl, Marta. You have your grandfather's eyes, honest eyes." We sat in silence for a long time, listening to the clock tick. Tick, tock. Tick, tock. Counting down the moments. I didn't know then that she was already planning it. I didn't know that beneath the cushion of her chair, she had tucked away a small device. I didn't know she was documenting the betrayal of her own blood. Fast forward to the funeral. It was a lavish affair, exactly the kind Nana hated. There were lilies everywhere. She was allergic to lilies. Vanessa had organized it. She stood at the front of the church, dressed in black silk that probably cost more than my car, sobbing into a lace handkerchief. She looked like a tragic heroine from a movie. "My grandmother was a saint," Vanessa wailed during the eulogy, clutching the podium. We shared such a special bond. Every week we would sit and laugh. She was my rock. I sat in the back row, wearing a simple black dress I'd bought from a thrift store. I couldn't cry. I felt hollowed out, as if someone had scooped out my insides with a spoon. The hypocrisy made me nauseous. I kept hearing Nana's voice in my head. She checks her watch. My mother sat beside me, squeezing my knee. "Ignore her," she whispered. "We know the truth." But did we? Did we really know the extent of it? Then came the reading of the will, the day of reckoning. The library smelled different that day, stale. The warmth was gone, replaced by the scent of greed. The room was packed. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in a decade. Everyone was there, their eyes darting around, appraising the furniture, the paintings, the rugs. Calculating. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, demanding attention. He began to read. It was standard legal jargon at first. Small sums were left to various charities, a few trinkets to distant relatives. Then he got to the main assets, the house, the savings, the investments. The estate was worth millions. I knew Nana was comfortable, but I didn't know she was wealthy. The tension in the room ratcheted up so high it felt like the windows might shatter. Vanessa was smiling. It was a subtle, smug little smile. She sat straighter, smoothing her skirt. She was the favorite. Or so she told everyone. She was the one who handled the doctors. She was the one who visited weekly. To my niece Linda, I leave my collection of porcelain dolls, Mr. Henderson read. A murmur of disappointment from Aunt Linda, but she nodded. To my cousin Vanessa, I leave. Vanessa held her breath. The smile widened. Nothing. The silence was instant, absolute. Excuse me? Vanessa whispered, the smile frozen on her face like a grotesque mask. Mr. Henderson continued, ignoring her. To my granddaughter Vanessa, I leave nothing. Furthermore, I explicitly forbid her from acquiring any item from this estate at auction or sale. That's impossible, Vanessa shrieked, jumping up. This is insane. I was her caretaker. I was there every Sunday. Sit down, Miss Miller, Mr. Henderson said, his voice like grinding stones. I have not finished. He looked down at the document, then raised his eyes to meet mine. I was shrinking into my chair, wishing the floor would swallow me. I didn't want the money. I just wanted this fighting to stop. I wanted to go home and cry for my grandmother. The remainder of my estate, including this property, my liquid assets, and all personal effects, I leave to the granddaughter who loved me most, to the one who never asked for a dime, to the one who sat with me when it rained and brushed my hair when my hands were too tired to lift the comb, to Marta. The room gasped collectively. Heads whipped around to look at me. I felt the blood drain from my face. Me? No! Vanessa screamed, her face contorted with rage. That little leech! She barely has 2 pennies to rub together. She probably manipulated her. I was the one who visited. I visited every week. And that brings us back to the moment the world stopped. The moment Mr. Henderson picked up the silver recorder. He looked at Vanessa with a mixture of pity and disgust. As I said, she recorded every conversation. Play it, Vanessa challenged, though her voice wavered. Play it! I have nothing to hide. She loved me. Mr. Henderson pressed the button. A crackle of static filled the room. Then Nana's voice, weak but clear. Vanessa, are you there? Then Vanessa's voice, sharp, impatient. The difference in tone was jarring. I'm here, Grandma. God, it smells like mothballs in here. Can we open a window? I'm cold, dear, Nana's voice said. You're always cold. Look, I don't have all day. I have a brunch at 1. Did you sign those papers I left? The power of attorney papers? Nana asked. I told you, I need to read them first. Just sign them, Vanessa's voice on the recording snapped, loud and cruel. You don't understand them anyway. You're confusing everything. If you don't sign them, who's going to manage your money? You'll lose everything. Do you want to end up in a state home? Because that's where you're going if you don't let me help you. The gasps in the room were audible. My mother covered her mouth with her hand. Vanessa stood frozen, her face pale. I don't want to go to a home, Nana whispered on the tape. Then sign the papers. And tell me where the key to the safety deposit box is. I need to inventory the jewelry for insurance. It's in the desk, Nana said softly. Vanessa, will you stay for tea? Marta brought cookies. I don't have time for tea with you, and I certainly don't want Marta's stale cookies. I have a life, Grandma. I'm doing this for you. Now let me find that key. There was the sound of drawers opening and slamming shut, then the click of heels walking away. Mr. Henderson pressed stop. The silence that followed was louder than the scream had been. It was a suffocating, judgmental silence. Vanessa looked around the room, desperate for an ally, but everyone, even her own mother, looked away. You doctored that," Vanessa stammered, tears streaming down her face now, but they were tears of humiliation, not sorrow. "That's out of context. I was stressed. I was trying to help her." Mr. Henderson picked up a stack of CDs from his desk. "I have 40 hours of audio, Vanessa. Would you like to hear the one where you discuss how long it takes for a person with her heart condition to expire? Or perhaps the one where you call her a stubborn old bat to your friend on speakerphone while she was sitting right next to you?" Vanessa collapsed back into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. It was an ugly sound. Mr. Henderson turned his gaze to me. His expression softened. "There is also a recording for you, Marta. Would you like to hear it?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears blurring my vision. He pressed a different button. "Mr. Henderson?" Nana's voice came through, but this time it sounded different. It sounded warm. It sounded like the Nana I knew. "Yes, Mrs. Rose?" "Make sure Marta knows," she said. I could hear the smile in her voice. "Make sure she knows that the rainy Sundays were the sunlight of my week. She thinks she does nothing, but she saves me. Every time she walks through that door, she saves me. She never asks for anything. She wears those shoes with the holes in them, and she brings me cookies. She brushes my hair so gently. Tell her I'm leaving her everything, not because she needs the money, though I know she does. I'm leaving it to her because she has a heart of gold in a world of stone, and I want to protect that heart." A sob escaped my throat. I buried my face in my hands. I could feel her hand on my cheek again, the smell of lavender, the sound of the rain. She had seen everything. She had seen the holes in my shoes that I tried to hide. She had seen the love I tried to give. Mr. Henderson walked over to me and placed a heavy iron key in my hand. It was still warm. "The house is yours, Marta," he said softly, "and everything in it. She wanted you to be safe." I looked up. Vanessa was glaring at me through her fingers, her eyes venomous, filled with a hatred so pure it chilled me. This wasn't over. I could see it in the set of her jaw. She had lost the battle, but she was already planning the war. "This is not fair," Vanessa hissed, standing up again, her composure completely gone. "She manipulated her. She played the victim. I will contest this. I will drag this through every court in the country. You won't see a dime, Marta." Mr. Henderson simply closed the folder. "You can try, Vanessa, but the voice of the deceased is very powerful in a court of law, and she has quite a lot to say about you." I stood up, my legs shaking. I clutched the key in my hand so tight it bit into my palm. I looked at my cousin, really looked at her, for the first time that day. I saw the designer clothes, the perfect hair, the emptiness behind her eyes. "I didn't manipulate her, Vanessa," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "I just loved her." I turned my back on her and looked out the window. It had started to rain, just like that Sunday. The drops raced down the glass, blurring the world outside. I was 29 years old. I was alone, and I had just inherited a fortune and a family vendetta. But as I touched the cold glass, I felt a strange warmth spread through my chest. Nana was still here. She had the last word, and she had chosen me. The rain outside intensified, drumming a relentless rhythm against the pane. masking the ragged breathing behind me. I didn't turn around immediately. I needed a moment to steady my heart, which felt like a trapped bird battering against my ribs. The reflection in the darkened glass showed a ghostly tableau of the room behind me. The heavy oak furniture, the rows of leather-bound books that Nana loved but could no longer read in her final years, and the scattered assembly of my relatives who stood like statues frozen in a moment of catastrophic upheaval. "You think this is over?" Vanessa's voice was no longer a scream. It was a low, vibrating hiss, far more terrifying than her earlier outburst. It was the sound of a snake coiling before a strike. I turned slowly. The iron key in my palm felt heavy, an anchor keeping me grounded in this surreal storm. Vanessa had wiped her face. The mascara was smeared in dark streaks across her cheeks, ruining her perfect foundation, making her look unhinged, dangerous. She took a step toward me, her heels clicking ominously on the hardwood floor. "You think you can just waltz in here with your sad eyes and your cheap shoes and steal my birthright?" She spat, closing the distance between us until I could smell the expensive perfume that had turned sour on her skin. "You, a waitress? You don't know the first thing about managing an estate like this. You'll run it into the ground in 6 months." "I didn't steal anything, Vanessa," I whispered, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound brave. "Nana made her choice. You heard her." "I heard a senile old woman who was manipulated by a pauper looking for a payout," she snapped, stabbing a manicured finger toward my chest. She didn't touch me, but I flinched. "Do you have any idea what the property taxes alone are on this place? Do you? Of course not. You worry about tips. You worry about bus fare. You are out of your depth, Marta. You are drowning, and you don't even know it." "Ms. Miller, that is enough." Mr. Henderson's voice cut through the air like a gavel. He hadn't moved from his desk, but his presence filled the room. His eyes were cold behind his spectacles. "You are trespassing on private property. The owner has the right to ask you to leave." Vanessa spun around to face him, her hair whipping against her face. "The owner? This is a farce. I am her flesh and blood." "So is she," the lawyer replied calmly. "And unlike you, she didn't view Mrs. Rose as a piggy bank." Vanessa let out a strangled sound of frustration. She looked around the room, her eyes landing on her mother, my Aunt Linda. Linda had been sitting in stunned silence, clutching her purse as if it contained the secrets of the universe. Now she stood up, smoothing down her skirt, her face a mask of sudden, terrifying diplomacy. "Vanessa, calm down," Linda said, her voice sugary sweet but brittle as spun glass. She walked over to us, placing a hand on Vanessa's shaking shoulder, but her eyes, cold, calculating, shark-like, were fixed on me. "Marta, darling." The endearment made my skin crawl. Aunt Linda hadn't called me darling since I was 5 years old. She hadn't called me anything at all for the last 10 years, usually looking right through me at family gatherings, as if I were part of the wallpaper. "Martha, look, emotions are running high," Linda continued, offering me a tight, strained smile. "We are all grieving. Nana, Mother, she was clearly not in her right mind at the end. We all know that." "She sounded perfectly lucid on the recording, Aunt Linda," I said, my grip on the key tightening until it hurt. Linda waved her hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. "Audio can be deceptive. Look, sweetie, let's be practical. Vanessa is right about one thing. This estate, it's a burden. It's a massive financial responsibility. The upkeep, the taxes, the legal fees. It will crush you. You have your little life. You have your job. You don't want this stress. I stared at her, amazed by the audacity. They weren't just greedy, they were predators who sensed weakness. They looked at my thrift store dress and saw a victim. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though I knew exactly what was coming. Linda took a step closer, invading my personal space with the scent of lilies, the flowers Nana was allergic to. "We can fix this. We can keep it in the family properly. You sign over the deed to the house and the investment accounts to Vanessa and me. In exchange, we will give you a very generous cash settlement, $50,000, right now. You could buy a new car, you could put a down payment on a nice little condo, somewhere manageable." $50,000. The estate was worth millions. They were trying to buy me off with crumbs, thinking I was starving enough to eat them off the floor. I looked past Linda to Vanessa. She wasn't crying anymore. She was watching me with a look of hungry expectation. She thought I would break. She thought I was the same quiet cousin who sat in the corner at Christmas, grateful for a pair of socks. I looked at my mother, who was still sitting in the back row. Her eyes were red from crying, not for the money, but for her mother. She gave me a tiny, imperceptible nod. It wasn't a nod to take the money. It was a nod of strength. Stand tall. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of old paper and lavender that still lingered in the room, Nana's scent. "No," I said. The word hung in the air, simple and absolute. Linda's smile vanished instantly, replaced by a sneer that mirrored her daughter's. "Don't be stupid, girl. You are making a mistake. You are declaring war on this family." "I am not declaring war," I said, my voice gaining strength, drawing power from the very floorboards beneath my feet. "I am honoring my grandmother's wishes. She wanted me to have this house. She wanted me to be safe. I'm not selling. Not for 50,000, not for 50 million. Vanessa laughed then. It was a harsh, jagged sound. "You'll regret this, Marta. I swear to you, I will tie you up in court for years. I will bleed you dry. I will make sure you wish you had never walked into this house." Mr. Henderson stood up then, the scraping of his chair loud in the tense silence. "I believe the proceedings are concluded. The keys have been handed over. The will has been read. I suggest you all leave before I call the authorities to escort you off the premises." The threat of police hung heavy. In their social circle, a scene involving police cars in the driveway was a fate worse than death. Linda grabbed Vanessa's arm, her fingernails digging into the silk of her daughter's dress. "We're leaving," Linda hissed. "Come on, Vanessa, we need to call our lawyers." Vanessa shook her mother off. She walked to the door, then stopped. She turned back one last time. She didn't scream. She didn't shout. She looked at me, and slowly, a smile spread across her face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a promise. It was the smile of someone who knew something I didn't. Or perhaps the smile of someone who had nothing left to lose and was prepared to burn the world down. "Enjoy the house, cousin," she said softly. "It has so many ghosts." She turned and walked out. The heavy library doors boomed shut behind them, the sound echoing like a gunshot. One by one, the other relatives filed out. Uncles who had ignored me for years wouldn't meet my eyes. Cousins who I used to play tag with shuffled past, staring at their phones, uncomfortable with the shift in power. They were like rats fleeing a sinking ship, or perhaps fleeing a ship that had suddenly raised a flag they didn't recognize. Finally, it was just me, my mother, and Mr. Henderson. The silence that descended was different now. It wasn't hostile. It was exhausted. Mr. Henderson sighed, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. He looked 10 years older than he had an hour ago. I apologize for that, Marta. Rose predicted it would be ugly, but I admit, that level of vitriol. She knew, I said, looking at the recorder on the desk. She knew exactly who they were. Mr. Henderson nodded solemnly. She did, which is why she left you this. He opened the top drawer of the desk and pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. It was cream-colored, heavy. My name was written on the front in Nana's shaky, elegant script, for Marta, to be opened when the wolves have gone. I took the envelope, my hands trembling again. She set up a trust for the taxes and maintenance, Mr. Henderson said gently. She knew they would try to scare you with the costs. You don't have to worry about the money, Marta. Not anymore. The house is paid for, the bills are covered. You can just live. Tears pricked my eyes again. She had thought of everything. Even from beyond the grave, she was shielding me. She was still wrapping me in her shawl, keeping out the cold rain. Thank you, Mr. Henderson, I choked out. He began to pack up his briefcase. I will be in touch tomorrow with the paperwork. For tonight, lock the doors, rest. It's your home now. He gave my shoulder a brief, fatherly squeeze and left. My mother walked over to me. She looked tired, her face lined with grief and the stress of the confrontation. She wrapped her arms around me, and for a long time we just stood there, holding each other in the center of the library. I'm proud of you, Mom whispered into my hair. Nana loved you so much. I'm scared, Mom, I confessed, my voice muffled against her coat. Did you see Vanessa's face? She's going to come back. She's not going to stop. Let her come, my mother said, pulling back to look at me, her eyes fierce. You have this. She tapped the envelope in my hand. Go on, she said softly. Read it. I'll go make us some tea. Real tea, not the stuff Vanessa pretended to drink. My mother left the room, heading toward the kitchen. I was alone. I walked over to Nana's favorite armchair, the leather worn smooth by decades of use. I sat down. It felt like a sacrilege, like I was sitting on a throne I hadn't earned. The room was darkening as the storm outside raged on. I reached out and clicked on the small brass reading lamp. A pool of warm yellow light spilled over the desk, illuminating the envelope. With a deep breath, I broke the wax seal. Inside was a letter, several pages long, written on her personal stationery. The handwriting started out strong, but grew shakier near the end. My dearest Marta, if you are reading this, the worst part is over. The screaming is done. The lawyers have had their say, and you are likely sitting in my chair feeling like an imposter. Stop it. You belong there. I smiled through my tears, wiping them away with the back of my hand. She knew me so well. I know I have placed a burden on you today, my sweet girl. Wealth is a heavy coat to wear, especially when others want to strip it from your back. I saw Vanessa's ambition a long time ago. It is a hunger that can never be fed. But I also saw your heart. Do you remember the day you found the baby bird in the garden? You were 7. Vanessa wanted to poke it with a stick. You made it a nest out of a shoebox and dug up worms in the mud for 3 days until it could fly. That was the day I knew. I knew who would care for my legacy. Not the silver, Marta. Not the paintings. Those are just things. My legacy is this home. It is a place of sanctuary. I have left you the means to fight them. Mr. Henderson has instructions. But I have also left you something else, something Vanessa does not know about. I paused, my heart skipping a beat. I turned the page. In the attic, behind the old wardrobe where I keep your grandfather's uniforms, there is a loose floorboard. You know the one. It used to squeak when we played hide and seek. Underneath it is a box. It contains the journals I kept for 50 years. It contains the truth about this family, about where the money came from, and about the secrets your Aunt Linda and Vanessa have been hiding for a very long time. Vanessa thinks she is fighting for an inheritance. She doesn't realize she is fighting to keep her own skeletons buried. If she attacks you, Marta, and she will, you go to that box. You read the entry from August 12th, 1998. You will know what to do. Don't let them bully you. You are a rose. You have thorns. Use them. I love you, my starlight. Eat a cookie for me. Love, Nana. I lowered the letter, my hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. Secrets. A box in the attic. August 1998. The date sent a shiver down my spine, though I didn't know why. I was only 4 years old then. I looked up at the ceiling, toward the attic. The house suddenly felt different. It wasn't just a shelter anymore. It was a fortress containing a weapon. Nana hadn't just given me money. She had given me ammunition. The sound of the front door slamming startled me. I jumped up, clutching the letter to my chest. "Mom?" I called out. There was no answer, just the sound of the rain and the settling of the old house. "Mom?" I called again, moving toward the hallway. The kitchen was empty. The kettle was on the stove, unlit. My mother was gone. Confusion swirled in my mind. Had she gone to the car for something? I walked to the front window and peered out into the gloom. My mother's beat-up sedan was still in the driveway. But there was another car parked behind it now, a black luxury sedan with tinted windows. The engine was running, the exhaust puffing gray clouds into the rain. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. I pulled it out. A text message from an unknown number. Check the porch. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. I ran to the front door and threw it open. The wind lashed at my face, stinging my skin. There, on the welcome mat, lay my mother's purse, and next to it, a single, perfect white lily. Vanessa's calling card. I stared at the flower, its petals pristine against the muddy mat. It was a threat, a message loud and clear. We can get to anyone. We can touch anyone. I looked up at the black car in the driveway. The window rolled down just an inch. I couldn't see a face, but I saw the flash of a lighter and the glow of a cigarette. Then the car shifted into reverse, tires spinning on the wet gravel, and peeled away into the darkness. I grabbed my mother's purse and ran into the rain, screaming her name. "Mom! Mom!" But the only answer was the thunder rolling across the hills, sounding like the laughter of angry gods. I stumbled back inside, soaking wet, slamming the door and locking it with trembling fingers. I leaned against the wood, sliding down until I hit the floor. I gasped for air, clutching the purse. My mother was gone. They had taken her? Or had she gone with them? No, she wouldn't leave me, not like this. I looked at the letter still crumpled in my other hand. You are a rose. You have thorns. Fear washed over me, threatening to drown me. But beneath the fear, something else ignited, a spark of rage. Hot, searing rage. They thought they could scare me? They thought they could take the only family I had left to get to a bank account? I stood up. I wiped the rain and tears from my face. I walked back into the library to Nana's desk. I placed the key, the letter, and the white lily on the mahogany surface. I wasn't the waitress anymore. I wasn't the poor cousin in the thrift store dress. I was the owner of this house. I was the keeper of the secrets in the attic. I kicked up the phone on the desk and dialed Mr. Henderson's number. "Pick up," I whispered. "Pick up." "Hello?" His voice was groggy. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice startlingly steady, cold as the rain outside. "Don't go to sleep. Vanessa just made her first move, and I'm going to need you to tell me exactly how to use those thorns Nana talked about. Because if they want a war," I thought, staring at the lily, "I'm going to give them a massacre." Mr. Henderson's breathing was ragged on the other end of the line. The silence stretched between us, filled only by the crackle of the connection and the relentless drumming of the rain against the library windows. I could hear him shuffling papers, the sound sharp and frantic, stripping away his professional veneer. "Marta, listen to me very carefully," he finally said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You need to verify that your mother is not in the house. Check every room. Lock the doors. Do not go outside. Do not engage with anyone who comes to the gate. I am calling the police, and then I am coming over." "The police?" My voice cracked, a small, pathetic sound in the vastness of the room. "Mr. Henderson, there was a lily, a white lily. You know what that means. It's what they put on Nana's grave before the funeral was even announced. It's their mark." "It is a scare tactic, Marta." "It has to be," he insisted, though I could hear the doubt trembling beneath his words. "Vanessa is vicious, yes, and Linda is desperate, but kidnapping? That is a felony. That is life in prison. They are socialites, not gangsters." "You didn't see her eyes," I whispered, gripping the phone until my knuckles turned white. "You didn't see the way she smiled. She has nothing left to lose. They think I'm weak. They think I'll trade the deed for my mother." "We will find her," Henderson said, his tone shifting from lawyer to protector. "Go to the safe room. Do you know where it is?" "Behind the bookshelf in the study. Wait for the sirens." I hung up the phone. The dial tone hummed in my ear, a lonely, mechanical sound. I stood frozen in the center of the library, the smell of old leather and expensive wax suddenly making me nauseous. The house, which moments ago had felt like a shelter, now felt like a mausoleum. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch, taking the shape of my aunt's sharp profile, of my cousin's manicured hands. I didn't go to the safe room. I couldn't hide in a hole while my mother was out there in the cold, frightened and alone. My mother, who had scrubbed floors so I could have school supplies. My mother, who had endured Linda's snide comments for decades with a dignified silence. I ran to the kitchen first, my cheap heels skidding on the polished marble. The kettle was still warm. Her mug, chipped at the rim, a mug we had brought from our tiny apartment because she couldn't bear to drink from Nana's fine china, sat on the counter. A tea bag was waiting beside it. Earl Grey, her favorite. "Mom!" I screamed again, the sound tearing at my throat. I checked the pantry, the laundry room, the back porch. Nothing but the howling wind and the dark, wet garden. I collapsed against the refrigerator, sliding down to the cold tiles. The immense wealth surrounding me felt like a mockery. I owned this marble floor. I owned the crystal chandelier in the hallway. I owned the silver in the drawers. But I didn't have $50 in my bank account to pay a ransom, and I didn't have my mother. I was the poorest, rich girl in the world. Then the anger returned. It started in my stomach, hot and coiling, burning away the tears. Nana's letter was still in my pocket. "You are a rose. You have thorns." I stood up. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my dress. I wasn't going to wait for the police. The police would take statements. They would file reports. They would treat this like a domestic dispute. I needed leverage. I needed to bleed them before they bled me. I walked out of the kitchen and headed for the stairs. The staircase was a grand, sweeping thing, carpeted in deep crimson. As I climbed, the portraits of my ancestors seemed to watch me. Stern men in suits, women in pearls. Nana's portrait was at the top of the landing. She looked regal, her eyes twinkling with that secret knowledge she always seemed to possess. "Go get them, Marta," I imagined her saying. I reached the second floor and looked up at the ceiling hatch that led to the attic. It was high, dark, and cobwebbed. I dragged a heavy oak chair from the hallway, the legs scraping loudly against the floorboards, a sound of defiance in the quiet house. I climbed up, pushed the hatch open, and a cloud of dust rained down on me, smelling of dry wood and forgotten time. I pulled myself up into the darkness. The attic was cavernous, lit only by the faint gray light filtering through a small dormer window battered by the rain. Shadows of old furniture loomed like sleeping beasts. A rocking horse with one ear. A dress form wearing a rotting lace gown. Stacks of newspapers from the 70s. I navigated the maze, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Behind the old wardrobe where I keep your grandfather's uniforms. I found it in the far corner, a massive mahogany wardrobe carved with lions' heads. It looked immovable. I gritted my teeth, planted my feet, and shoved. It groaned, heavy and stubborn, resisting me just like this family had always resisted me. "Move!" I grunted, shoving with all my weight, channeling every ounce of rage I felt toward Vanessa, toward Linda, toward every time they had looked at my shoes and sneered. With a screech of wood on wood, the wardrobe shifted a few inches, just enough. I knelt, ignoring the splinters digging into my knees. The floorboards were wide and rough. I ran my hands over them, feeling for the loose one. The third one from the wall moved slightly under my touch. I dug my fingernails into the gap and pried. It came up with a dry snap. Below, nestled in the insulation and dust, was a black metal lockbox. It was heavy, cold to the touch. I pulled it out and sat cross-legged on the dusty floor, the box in my lap. It wasn't locked. Nana wanted me to find this. I opened the lid. Inside were stacks of leather-bound journals tied with ribbons. I pushed the folder aside. That looked like business. I wanted the personal. I wanted the poison. I found the journal marked 1998. My hands were shaking so bad I could hardly turn the pages. The paper was brittle, the ink fading to sepia. I flipped through the months. January, March, June. August 12th, 1998. The entry was written in a shaky hand, different from her usual flowing script. The ink was blotchy, as if she had been crying while she wrote. "God forgive me for what I have done today. I have chosen the family name over justice. I have chosen blood over morality. Linda came to me at 3 a.m., covered in dirt, her car battered. She was hysterical. She said it was an accident. She said the man on the bicycle came out of nowhere. She said she was drunk, just a little, just enough to blur the edges." I stopped breathing. The silence in the attic was deafening. I read on. "She hit him. She left him there, in the ditch on Route 9. A father of 3. I know who he is. Mr. Calloway from the bakery. And she drove away. Vanessa was in the back seat, asleep. My granddaughter was in the car while her mother killed a man and fled." My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp. Mr. Calloway, I remembered him. He used to give me free cookies when I was a toddler. Everyone said it was a hit and run, that they never found the driver. I paid the police chief. God help me. I paid him $50,000 to lose the report on Linda's car repairs. I paid a mechanic in the next county to crush the vehicle. I silenced the witnesses with cash settlements drawn from the trust. I saved my daughter from prison, but I condemned my soul. And now she looks at me not with gratitude, but with entitlement. She thinks she got away with it because she is special. She doesn't know I kept the mechanic's receipt. She doesn't know I have the original police report that was supposed to be shredded. I dug deeper into the box. There it was, an envelope stapled to the back of the journal. Inside, a yellowed receipt from Sal's Auto Body for the disposal of a 1997 Mercedes-Benz and a photocopy of a police report naming Linda Miller as a suspect in a fatal hit-and-run. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty attic. This wasn't just gossip. This wasn't just embarrassment. This was murder. This was 20 years in a federal penitentiary. And Vanessa knew. The journal said she was in the car. Maybe she was asleep then, but she had grown up in the shadow of this secret. This was the rot at the core of their glamour. They weren't just mean. They were criminals hiding behind a wall of money. A siren wailed in the distance, getting louder. The police. But then a different sound cut through the noise of the storm. The sound of the front door downstairs crashing open. Not the police. The police would knock. "Marta!" Vanessa's voice screamed from the foyer, echoing up the stairwell like a banshee. "I know you're in here!" "You didn't think we'd actually leave, did you?" I scrambled to my feet, clutching the journal and the evidence to my chest. They had come back. They had come back to finish it before the authorities arrived. They knew Nana might have left something. They were desperate. "Come out, little mouse," Vanessa taunted. Her voice was slurred, unhinged. "We have a trade to make, Mommy, for the deed. And if you don't come down in 10 seconds, I'm going to tell the boys in the car to drive your mother to the quarry." The quarry. Deep, dark water. Fear tried to paralyze me, tried to make my knees buckle. But the weight of the journal in my hands was like a shield. I wasn't a mouse. I was the granddaughter of the woman who cleaned up their mess. And now I was the woman who was going to expose it. I didn't hide. I didn't retreat to the safe room. I walked to the hatch and looked down. Through the gap in the banister, I could see Vanessa standing in the hallway below. She was soaking wet, her hair plastered to her skull, a fire poker gripped in her hand. She looked feral. Beside her stood Aunt Linda, looking pale and sick, her eyes darting around nervously. "Where is she?" Linda hissed. "We just need the signature, Vanessa. Don't hurt her." "Shut up, Mother," Vanessa snapped. "We are past signatures. We are taking what is ours." I took a deep breath. I thought of the holes in my shoes. I thought of my mother's tea growing cold. I thought of Mr. Calloway, the baker. I stepped onto the landing, into the light. "I'm right here, Vanessa," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. It didn't sound like my voice. It sounded like Nana's. Vanessa whipped her head up, eyes narrowing. "Throw down the key, Marta, and the deed. Sign it, and we bring your mother back." I slowly descended the first step. The wood creaked under my foot. "I don't think I will," I said. Vanessa laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "You don't think you will? Do you think this is a game? We have her." I held up the yellowed piece of paper, the receipt from Sal's Auto Body. "August 12th, 1998, I read aloud, my voice projecting through the cavernous hall. Route 9, a man on a bicycle. The silence that slammed into the room was absolute. It was heavier than the thunder outside. Linda let out a choked sound, a gasp that sounded like a dying animal. She staggered back, clutching her chest, her face turning the color of ash. Vanessa froze. The fire poker lowered slightly. Her eyes went wide. Not with fear, but with shock that I knew, that I dared. "What is that?" Vanessa whispered. "It's a ticket to prison, Aunt Linda," I said, looking directly at the older woman. "Nana kept everything. The police report you paid to disappear? I have it. The mechanic's affidavit? I have it." "You're lying," Linda croaked. "She burned it. She told me she burned it." "She lied to protect the family," I said, taking another step down. "But she left it for me, because she knew one day you would come for me. She knew you were a monster." "Give me that!" Vanessa screamed, finding her rage again. She lunged toward the stairs, raising the poker. I didn't flinch. I held the papers over the banister. "Take one more step, Vanessa, and I send a photo of this to Mr. Weinberg. Henderson and the district attorney. I have already texted him. The police are 2 minutes away." It was a lie. I hadn't texted the photo yet, but they didn't know that. Vanessa stopped. She looked at her mother. Linda had collapsed onto the bottom step, weeping into her hands, broken by the ghost of her own sin. The arrogance was gone. The socialite veneer had dissolved, leaving only a frightened, guilty old woman. "Call them off, Vanessa," I commanded. My voice echoed with the authority of the house itself. "Call your goons. Bring my mother back. Now, or I destroy you. I will make sure everyone at the country club knows. I will make sure you lose every dime, every friend, every shred of dignity. You will rot in a cell." Vanessa stared at me. Her chest was heaving. She looked from the papers in my hand to her weeping mother. She calculated. She was a predator, but she was also a survivor. She knew when the trap had snapped shut. She lowered the poker. It clattered onto the floor, the sound loud and sharp. With a trembling hand, she pulled out her phone. She didn't look at me. She dialed a number. "Bring her back," she said into the phone, her voice dead. "Just drop her at the gate. Yes, now." She ended the call and looked up at me. Her eyes were filled with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. "You win, cousin," she spat, "but you'll never be one of us." I looked at the grand foyer, at the weeping aunt, at the broken cousin, and at the legacy of pain they had built. "Thank God for that," I said. Blue and red lights flashed through the stained glass of the front door. The sirens cut the air, loud and close. The cavalry had arrived, but they were too late to save me. I didn't need saving anymore. I walked down the rest of the stairs, the journal tucked under my arm, stepping over the fire poker Vanessa had dropped. I walked past them as if they were ghosts. I walked to the front door and threw it open to the rain and the police lights. And there, coming through the gates, soaking wet and stumbling but alive, was my mother. I dropped the papers. I dropped the inheritance. I ran into the rain. But as I held her, feeling her shivering body against mine, looking back at the house that was now mine, I knew the war wasn't over. Vanessa had surrendered a battle, but the look in her eyes promised that she would burn in hell before she let me keep this peace. Let her try, I thought, feeling the cold rain mix with the hot tears on my face. I have the thorns now, and I know how to use them. The rain felt like ice against my skin, but the heat radiating from my mother's trembling body was the only thing that tethered me to the earth. We collapsed onto the wet gravel of the driveway, ignoring the mud staining my dress and her worn-out coat. I ran my hands over her face, pushing back strands of graying hair that were plastered to her forehead, needing to feel the warmth of her skin to believe she was truly there. She was crying, deep, heaving sobs that shook her small frame, but her hands were gripping my shoulders with a strength I didn't know she possessed. checking me, searching for broken bones or bruises, just as she had done when I fell off my bike at 6 years old. Even in the midst of her own terror, her first instinct was to be my mother. "I'm okay, Mom. I'm okay," I choked out, my voice lost in the wail of the sirens and the drumming of the storm. She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed and wide with a fear that hadn't yet faded. "Marta," she whispered, her voice cracking, "they took me. They just took me. I was making tea." I pulled her into my chest again, rocking her back and forth as the blue and red lights of the police cruisers washed over us, turning the rain into falling diamonds and blood. I glared at the house, that looming stone beast that had swallowed my grandmother and now tried to devour us. It wasn't a home. It was a theater where Vanessa and Linda had performed their cruel plays for too long. 2 police officers were rushing toward us, their flashlights cutting through the gloom, but I barely registered them. My focus was on the figure stepping out of a silver car that had just pulled up behind the cruisers, Mr. Henderson. He moved with a speed that defied his age, ignoring the umbrella his driver tried to offer him. He marched through the puddles, his expensive suit instantly soaked, his face a mask of grim determination. He reached us just as the officers did. He didn't speak to the police first. He knelt right there in the mud beside me. He looked at my mother, then at me, his eyes landing on the leather-bound journal I still clutched under my arm like a holy scripture. "You found it," he said softly. The wind tried to snatch his words away, but I heard them. "I found everything," I replied, and my voice sounded old. Ancient, even. "Inside," Henderson commanded, standing up and gesturing to the officers. "Get them inside. It's freezing out here. And secure the other 2 women. Do not let them leave the premises." The walk back to the front door felt like a funeral procession in reverse. I supported my mother, her weight heavy against my side. We crossed the threshold, dripping water onto the pristine marble floor that Vanessa had always forbidden me to walk on with shoes. Now we were muddying it, staining the perfection with the filth of the reality they had created. Vanessa and Linda were standing near the grand staircase, corralled by a young female officer. Vanessa's face was a ruin of smeared mascara and twisted rage. The fire poker lay on the floor a few feet away, evidence of her intent. Linda was seated on a velvet bench, staring at her hands, catatonic. The fight had left her eyes. She was just a hollow shell now, crushed by the weight of 1998. But Vanessa was still fighting. She was a viper that didn't know its head had been cut off. When she saw us enter, saw Mr. Henderson, she straightened her spine. "This is ridiculous," Vanessa shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at me. "Arrest her! She broke into the attic. She's mentally unstable, just like her grandmother was at the end. She threatened my mother." My mother stiffened beside me, shrinking away from Vanessa's voice. I felt a surge of protectiveness so fierce it burned my throat. I stepped forward, placing myself between my mother and my cousin. "Be quiet, Vanessa," I said. It wasn't a scream, it was a flat order. "Don't you tell me to be quiet, you little waitress!" Vanessa spat the word like a curse. "You think because you found some old diary you can scare us? That's hearsay. That's the rambling of a senile old woman. I was the one who was here. I was the one who cared for her." Mr. Henderson stepped into the center of the foyer. He took off his wet glasses and wiped them with a handkerchief, a slow, deliberate movement that commanded silence. The police officers watched him, sensing the authority radiating from this man who had held the family's secrets for 40 years. "Vanessa," Henderson said, his voice deep and resonating off the high ceilings. You claim you were the devoted granddaughter. You claim you earned this estate through love and care. I did, Vanessa cried, tears of frustration welling up again. I visited every week, every single Wednesday for 3 years. I sat by her bed. I listened to her boring stories. I sacrificed my social life for her. And she, that ungrateful little brat, she only came for the money. She pointed at me again. Look at her cheap dress. Look at her shoes. She's a gold digger. She never loved Nana. I felt my mother's hand squeeze my arm. I wanted to scream, to list every time I had sneaked in through the back door just to brush Nana's hair because Vanessa had banned me from visiting. I wanted to talk about the times I read poetry to her over the phone until she fell asleep. But I stayed silent. I let Vanessa dig her own grave. Henderson looked at Vanessa with an expression of profound pity. It was the look one might give to a rabid dog before putting it down. You visited weekly, yes, Henderson agreed calmly. He reached into his briefcase. His hand emerged not with a document, but with a small digital voice recorder. It was an old model, scratched and worn. Vanessa's eyes flickered to the device. What is that? Your grandmother was old, Vanessa, but she was not senile, Henderson said, walking slowly toward her. She knew her hearing was failing, or at least she pretended it was. She told you she needed to record conversations to remember instructions from the doctors. But she didn't just record the doctors, did she? The color drained from Vanessa's face. It happened instantly, leaving her skin a sickly shade of gray. She recorded every conversation you had in that bedroom for the last 2 years, Henderson continued, his thumb hovering over the play button. She gave them to me for safekeeping. She wanted me to know the true nature of the granddaughter who loved her most. No, Vanessa whispered. Her arrogance evaporated. The lawyer looked at the police officers, then at me. Would you like me to play them? Specifically the one from 3 weeks ago, the day she asked you for a glass of water? Play it, I said. Henderson pressed the button. The silence in the foyer was absolute, broken only by the hiss of static from the tiny speaker. Then Nana's voice filled the room. It sounded weak, breathless. Vanessa, dear, please, my throat is so dry. Just a little water. Then Vanessa's voice cut in. It was sharp, impatient, dripping with venom. Oh my God, stop whining. I just sat down. You are so needy today. Do you know how much this purse cost? I can't be getting water every 5 minutes. Please, dear, it hurts. Drink your spit, Nana. Listen, did you sign the check for the remodeling? I told the contractor to start on Monday. I need that signature. Stop playing dead and sign the damn paper. I don't think I have enough in the liquid account for that, Vanessa. Then sell something. Sell the silver. You're going to die soon anyway. What do you need silver for? Just die already and save us all the trouble. God, you are exhausting. Click. Henderson stopped the recording. The echo of Vanessa's cruelty seemed to hang in the air like a foul smell. The young female officer looked at Vanessa with undisguised disgust. Even Aunt Linda, broken on the bench, covered her face with her hands and sobbed quietly. My mother was crying again, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. She looked at me, her eyes full of sorrow, not for herself, but for Nana. To die hearing those words, to die knowing your own blood was waiting for your last breath like a vulture. You monster, I whispered. My voice shook. You told everyone she died peacefully in her sleep. You told everyone you were holding her hand. Vanessa backed away until she hit the wall. She looked trapped, glancing wildly around the room for an exit, for an excuse, for anything. But there was nothing. The recording had stripped her naked. "It's out of context," she screeched, but the fight was gone. It was a lie, and she knew it. She was difficult. She had dementia. I was stressed. Henderson placed the recorder back in his pocket. He turned to the police officers. "Officers, I believe we have enough here to discuss the kidnapping charges regarding Marta's mother and, perhaps, elder abuse?" He then turned to me. "And regarding the other matter, Marta, the journal?" I looked down at the book in my hands. The proof of the hit and run, the proof that Linda, with Vanessa in the back seat, had killed a man and covered it up. I looked at Linda, sobbing on the bench. I looked at Vanessa, cornered and hateful. They wanted to destroy me. They wanted to take the only thing I had, my mother, to secure their wealth. But looking at them now, amidst the marble and the gold, they looked like paupers. They had no soul. They had no love. They had nothing. I walked over to Mr. Henderson and handed him the journal. "Give this to the district attorney," I said loud enough for Linda to hear. "Tell him about August 12th, 1998. Tell him about Mr. Calloway." A wail rose from Linda's throat, a sound of pure despair. Vanessa froze, her eyes widening as the final realization hit her. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the house. It was their freedom. "Get them out of my house," I said, turning my back on them. I didn't watch as the officers handcuffed them. I didn't watch as Vanessa screamed obscenities, kicking and thrashing as she was dragged out into the rain. I didn't watch as Linda was helped up, weeping, shuffling like an old woman to her doom. I only heard the heavy front door slam shut, cutting off their noise. Silence rushed back into the foyer. It was a heavy, thick silence. The house seemed to exhale. The tension that had held the walls together for decades, the secrets that had rotted the floorboards, were gone. I turned to my mother. She was still shivering, standing in her muddy shoes on the expensive rug. She looked small and frail, but she was looking at me with a fierce pride. "Marta," she said softly, "you did it." I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like a winner. I felt exhausted. I felt the weight of the legacy Nana had left me. It wasn't a prize. It was a responsibility to clean up the mess, to heal the wounds of this family. I walked over to her and took her cold hands in mine. "Come on, Mom," I said, my voice gentle. "Let's go to the kitchen. I'm going to make you that tea, and we're going to drink it out of Nana's fine china, because it's ours now, and no one is ever going to tell us we're not good enough again." As we walked toward the kitchen, leaving the muddy footprints behind us, I looked up at the portrait of Nana at the top of the stairs. In the dim light, I could have sworn she was smiling. The storm outside raged on, battering the windows, but inside, for the first time in 20 years, there was peace. The silence that followed the slamming of the front door was not empty. It was heavy, vibrating with the echoes of 20 years of unsaid words. The house, usually so imposing and hostile, seemed to settle into the earth, its stone bones finally at rest. I stood there for a moment, the adrenaline beginning to drain from my veins, leaving behind a deep, aching exhaustion that soaked into my marrow. My mother was still trembling. It wasn't just the cold rain or the shock of the abduction. It was the sheer magnitude of the liberation. She looked around the grand foyer, her eyes darting to the shadows as if she expected Vanessa to leap out with another cruel remark, or Linda to emerge with a list of chores. "They're gone, Mom," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, yet it carried clearly in the stillness. She looked at me, her eyes wide and wet. "The police? They took them in handcuffs, Marta. In handcuffs. Linda!" "Pearls don't make you innocent," I replied, gently taking her arm. Her coat was sodden, smelling of wet wool and the muddy earth of the quarry road where they had threatened to take her. Come on. We moved towards the kitchen, our footsteps sounding different on the marble now. Before, we had walked softly, trying not to disturb the masters of the house. Now, our steps were firm. We belonged here. The kitchen was a cavern of stainless steel and cold granite, a chef's kitchen that had rarely seen a home-cooked meal in the last decade. I guided my mother to one of the high stools at the island and went straight to the stove. My hands shook as I filled the kettle. The sound of the water rushing from the tap was mundane, ordinary, and beautiful. It was the sound of life continuing. Mr. Henderson appeared in the doorway a moment later. He had removed his soaked suit jacket and folded it neatly over his arm. His shoulders slumped slightly under the weight of the night's events. "The officers have taken their statements," he said quietly, stepping into the room but staying near the perimeter, respectful of our space. "Linda is incoherent." I turned on the burner, the click hiss of the gas igniting a blue flame that danced in the drafty room. "Vanessa is negotiating," Henderson said with a grim smile. "She is trying to trade information she doesn't have for leniency she doesn't deserve. She has already blamed the entire hit and run on her mother." "She was 20 years old in 1998, I said, watching the flame. "The district attorney knows that," Henderson assured me. He walked over to the island and placed a heavy hand on the granite counter. "Marta, you need to understand the extent of what happened tonight. That journal, it doesn't just send them away. It validates the will in a way no court can overturn. They contested the inheritance based on your grandmother's mental state, but the journal proves she was lucid, observant, and morally acute until the very end. She wasn't senile." My mother let out a small, choked sob. She heard everything, all those years. She heard them making fun of her. "She did," Henderson said softly. "And she heard you, Sarah. She heard you reading to her when you thought she was asleep. She heard you defending her dignity when the nurses were rough." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. He slid it across the counter towards me. "She wanted you to have this tonight. She gave me specific instructions." I stared at the pouch. The kettle behind me began to whistle, a low, rising note that demanded attention. I ignored it. I reached out and opened the drawstring. Inside was a heavy, old-fashioned iron key. It wasn't for a door. It looked like it belonged to a piece of furniture. "The secretary desk in her bedroom," Henderson explained. "The bottom drawer." I looked at my mother. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Go, Marta." I left the kitchen and climbed the back stairs, the servants' stairs that I knew by heart. They creaked familiarly under my feet. I walked down the long hallway, past Vanessa's room with its door flung open, revealing a chaos of clothes and expensive handbags, the debris of a life built on sand. I reached Nana's door. It was closed. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the brass knob. This room had been a place of sickness and tension for so long, but now, without the toxicity of my aunt and cousin, it felt different. It felt like a sanctuary. I pushed the door open. The room smelled of lavender and old paper, Nana's scent. The bed was made perfectly, the pillows fluffed, just as the hospice nurses had left them. But over by the window, overlooking the rain-lashed gardens, stood the mahogany secretary desk. I walked over to it, my heart hammering against my ribs. I sat in her chair. It still held the impression of her body. I inserted the iron key into the lock of the bottom drawer. It turned with a satisfying clunk. I pulled the drawer open. It wasn't filled with cash. It wasn't filled with diamonds. It was filled with cassette tapes, dozens of them, and a stack of letters tied with a blue ribbon. I picked up the first letter. On the envelope, in Nana's shaky but elegant script, was written, "For Marta. Read this when the house is quiet." My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped it. I carefully broke the seal. My dearest Marta, if you are reading this, then the worst has happened and the best has prevailed. I am sorry I had to leave you with a fight. I am sorry I couldn't just give you the world on a silver platter while I was alive. But I knew them. I knew that if I gave you money while I breathed, they would tear you apart to get it. They would have sued you, harassed you, destroyed you. I had to let them show their true faces. I had to let them hang themselves with their own greed. I sat in this chair for years, playing the role of the confused old woman. It was the hardest acting job of my life. I watched Vanessa look at my jewelry with hunger while asking if I was in pain. I watched Linda sign checks with my hand, guiding the pen while pretending to help. But I also watched you. I saw you bite your tongue when Vanessa insulted your clothes. I saw you work double shifts at the diner so you could buy me the soft blanket because the hospital sheets scratched my skin. You never asked for a dime. You only asked for my time. The inheritance, Marta, is not just the money. The money is vast, yes. Henderson will explain the trusts, the investments, the offshore accounts I hid from Linda. You will never have to work a double shift again. You will never have to worry about the heating bill or the rent. But the real gift is the truth. I recorded them not out of spite, but out of protection. I needed the world to see that love is an action, not a bloodline. You are my granddaughter in spirit and in heart. They were merely strangers who shared my last name. Take care of your mother. She is soft, and the world is hard on soft things. You have the thorns now, my little rose. Use them to protect her. Use them to protect yourself. And live. Live loudly, beautifully, and without apology. Burn the candles, drink the good wine, wear the silk. I love you beyond the grave and back. Nana. I lowered the letter, clutching it to my chest. The tears finally came, hot and fast, breaking the dam I had built to survive the night. She hadn't been confused. She hadn't been weak. She had been a warrior, fighting a silent war from her deathbed to ensure I would be the winner. I looked at the cassette tapes. Each one was labeled with a date. Vanessa, Christmas 2018. The incident with the doctor. She had cataloged their cruelty. She had built a fortress of evidence so high they could never climb over it. I turned. My mother was standing in the doorway, holding 2 steaming mugs of tea. She looked at me, then at the open drawer, and her face crumpled into a bitter smile. She knew, my mother whispered, walking over and placing the tea on the desk. She left us everything, Mom, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Not just the house. My mother sat on the edge of the bed, looking around the room. It feels lighter in here. It does, I agreed. We sat there for a long time, sipping the tea. It was Earl Grey, Nana's favorite. Outside, the storm was finally breaking. The thunder had rolled away to the east, leaving behind a steady, cleansing rain. My mother asked, looking at me with a dependency that terrified and empowered me. This house. We fill it, I said firmly, looking at the letter in my hand. We open the curtains. We take the plastic off the furniture in the living room. We hire a gardener who actually likes flowers, not just perfectly trimmed hedges. We make it a home, Mom. I stood up and walked to the window. Down below, the driveway was empty. The police cars were gone. The Mercedes was gone. It was just the wet gravel and the iron gates standing open, no longer barring us from the world, but welcoming us in. I thought of Vanessa, sitting in a cold holding cell, stripped of her designer clothes and her pretenses. I thought of the man on the bicycle in 1998 and his family who never got justice until tonight. Justice is a slow thing, I whispered to the glass. I turned back to my mother. She had picked up one of the cassette tapes and was looking at it with a mixture of horror and fascination. "What?" she asked. I walked over and took the tape from her hand. I placed it back in the drawer and locked it with the heavy iron key. "We keep them," I said, "not to listen to, but to remember. We keep them so we never forget what happens when you love money more than people." I pocketed the key. It felt heavy and warm against my thigh. "Come on," I said, extending my hand to her. "Let's go downstairs. Mr. Henderson is waiting, and I think we have a lot of paperwork to sign. But this time—" My mother took my hand. Her grip was stronger now. We walked out of the room, leaving the ghosts of the past locked in the drawer. We descended the grand staircase together. Two women who had walked through the fire and come out holding the water. As we reached the bottom step, the clouds outside parted just enough for a sliver of moonlight to pierce through the stained glass above the door. It cast a kaleidoscope of colors onto the floor where the fire poker had lain just an hour ago. The red, the blue, the gold. It was beautiful. It was ours. I'm 29 years old, I thought, correcting the timeline in my head, feeling older and younger all at once. I looked at the portrait of Nana hanging in the hallway. Her painted eyes seemed to twinkle in the gloom. "Thank you," I mouthed. And in the silence of the great house, I heard the answer, felt more than heard, wrapping around me like a warm blanket against the chill of the night. "You earned it, my love. You earned it."